As you make your way back to your seats, y'all are awesome. It is so good to see all of you. Tonight, I just want to begin, and it's really something that I feel like God wants us to hear. And maybe it's you specific in the place where you are, or maybe but it's simply that you are you, and put your name in there. You are deeply, wildly loved. You are loved. Not in such a way that someone's like, oh, I love you. No, you're pursued. Like God comes after you. And he wants and he desires you. So tonight, I just want you first to hear that. Hang on to what you just experienced in that video, because it's something that we're going to grab onto at the very end of our time tonight. But as we begin, I want you real quick, if you should have a little book. You got a book when you registered, right? And it has a lot of places to write some things down that would help you out later in life group, and in the rest of DNOW when you head to homes. If you do not have one of those books, could you just raise your hand and we'll give that to you? If you don't have one of those books, keep a hand up and we will get that to you, all right? We'll make sure you have one of those books. Awesome. Amazing. Keep your hand up if you don't have a book until you get one in your hand, then you can put your hand down. As we explore tonight, we're going to look at these crises, these moments, these challenges of faith. And faith's always kind of it's just a 5-letter word, but it's kind of a big word, right? It's a big word, this idea of belief. And I think when we think about faith, we as people we kind of tip back and forth between one of two different categories when it comes to belief. We tip back and forth between those people, and you know people like this, that literally will believe anything you tell them, right? Maybe you have someone like that in your life, and if you do, you've probably played numerous pranks on them, because you will literally tell them anything, banking on they will believe it, all right? I remember telling at one point, it was weird. We just had the Peeps on stage. I hate Peeps. But we had like this student that was like, hey, you know what Peeps are? Like Peeps are literally just like freeze-dried baby chicks like that. And she was like, are you kidding? I will never eat Peeps again. So we like lost Peep business because she believed that junk. They are not, all right? So if you're like, are you kidding me? I love Peeps, all right? They are not freeze-dried baby chicks. I'm pretty sure they're just marshmallow conglomerate of death. But anyway, all right? But all right, it's reality. We go back and forth between those that will believe anything and those that kind of almost like really believe nothing, right? I don't mean like the person like, no, but the person that will question everything. If you were to go outside and be like, the sky is blue, and they'd be like, is it really? And they'd be like, well, scientifically, actually, by the spectrum of light. And you're like, seriously, like that's the person like, okay, no one wants to hang out with you. All right, so this is the whole idea. It's the whole idea of like, we question everything. I'm actually more probably on the second one. Like I will question a lot, all right? We go back and forth between those that will believe anything, those who will believe nothing. Those that are completely naive, I will believe anything you tell me. And those that are constantly, this big word, skeptical, I'll question everything. The testing ground for which kind of party you're in is, how many of you love a magician or an illusionist, all right? I'm not talking about like your grandpa when he pulls the quarter out of your ear and he's like, got a quarter? And you're like, well, grandpa, I'll keep doing that for about 30,000 more times, all right? All right, so this is the whole idea. No, I love an illusionist, right? I remember, and I'm that guy, the reason this is the testing ground is because there's some of us in the room, when you see an illusionist or a magician, you're like, oh, and you're totally drawn in, you're totally amazed, and you're just there to witness it. And there's others, and maybe you're like this, and you're like, I'm going to figure this junk out. There's no way that you just cut her in half. No, it didn't happen. There was no blood. I'm figuring it out. I remember we went to Six Flags one time, Six Flags over Texas up in Arlington, all right? And my sister got called up in an illusionist show, and the whole thing was we were going to levitate your sister. And I was like, that sounds like a bad idea, all right? But it was my sister, so I said, go ahead, Laura, go. All right, so, all right. And sure enough, like she's levitating. She's like so high, I'm like, oh, this really might have been a bad idea. Is this whole idea? But the whole time I'm sitting out there going, I'm going to figure this out. Not my sister might fall to her death. I'm going, how's he doing this? I mean, how's this happening? Like, what am I not seeing? Because I'm going to figure this out. I have another friend who's an illusionist, all right? And I remember the way I know him is actually through his wife. Me and his wife, we did the whole, if you've heard of Pine Cove, or you've heard other camps, we did all the camps, and she was engaged to marry him. And I remember when she first told me, she was like, yeah, I'm going to marry this dude. He's an illusionist. He's a magician. And I was like, that might be a bad idea. Because you'll never know what to trust, all right, ever, all right? He's like, look what I did. It's like, did those flowers really just come out of your pocket, all right? Because I feel like that's less thought put into that, all right? But he is an incredible illusionist. You might have heard of him. You may have actually seen him if you have. His name is Brock Gill. And Brock will do these tricks where he will literally chain his body completely up. Somebody will put him in a coffin filled with water, and he has to escape or drown. And I'm like, what the world? All right. He's done this one thing. I mean, he did this one thing, and this lady comes up and pulls off her wedding ring. He's like, can I see your ring? And he totally loses it. All right. He hangs on that for 5 minutes. And it appears somehow he never left the stage. It's in the back of the room hanging off the camera. And the guy's he was like, hey, cameraman, can you look right there? And he's like, here's your wedding ring. I'm like, what? Right? How's he doing this? It's this whole idea. He does card tricks all the time. I love it. But there was one thing he did that I'm legit. He went to Israel and he did this tour called The Miracles of Jesus. Right? We're talking about water into wine, all this stuff. And he, by illusions, does all this stuff, including walking on water. At this point, I'm like, what? I'm like, I got to figure this out because you're not Jesus, bro. But he does it. Chris Angel's also done it. So obviously, I've got to figure this out. But that poses kind of a challenge because I'm like, only Jesus can walk on water. I was like, well, Brock Gill's doing it. I was like, oh man, what? What is going on in my life? And I think when we approach Jesus, and this is what I want us to think about, when we approach Jesus, I think we tend to be sometimes in one of those two parties. Maybe you're here tonight and you absolutely, and you believe absolutely everything about who Jesus says he is. Or maybe you're here tonight and you're going, man, didn't he claim to be God, but he had flesh and bone just like me? And that's a little bit too big of a bite to take. You've got too many questions and too many doubts. When we look at Jesus, and he did over and over and over make this preposterous claim that, hey, I'm God, I'm God, I'm God. If you were here this last Wednesday, we talked a little bit about that. But still, we can see how he was born. He was born not like any of us were born. Right? He was born of a virgin. He was born, right? He was born, he did turn water into wine. Wine, well, not wine, all right? He healed the lame, he brought people back to life. He did walk on water. But maybe in all of that, if we're really honest and in the way we actually live our lives, we still have questions. Is he really who he says he is? Does he have that type of power that would actually show that he is God? And I think maybe if that's you, you're in good company. I can be this person, and there have been numerous moments in my life where I will press hard pause, and I'm like, I got to figure this out. How is he doing that? It's like, who is this Jesus? And so as we look at our theme of all the stories are true, I want to look at two moments where Jesus shows up and he does what Jesus tended to do. He does the things, and it's expressly said, that no one else has ever done. If you've got a Bible tonight, I want you to turn to and we're going to look at John chapter 9. John chapter 9 is the story of a blind man. It's the story of a blind man who literally, couldn't get anyone to listen to him. Because there's this man, he's blind, and apparently he's been cast out to some degree, maybe even by his own family. And he's been blind since he was born. And how he is met is he's a beggar. So he's at a door, a gate, he's at an entryway somewhere, and he's just begging. He is utterly dependent on other people to maybe pay him attention. And we look in John chapter 9, we see this man, and it says, as Jesus passed by. He saw a man that was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Teacher, remember, these are the people that are closest to him. Teacher, who sinned, this dude or his parents? I don't know why that was their first question. Like, he's blind. Who's got the problem, him or his parents? Like, I don't know. We might be missing it. And it says, and Jesus says, it was not that this man sinned or that his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. So we must work the works of him who sent me while it's day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, and he does this again, this looks like just a sentence, but this is actually a moment where Jesus says, I am God. He goes, I am the light of the world. Those first two words, I am, is him going, hey, don't you forget, I'm God. Watch what's about to happen. So, he tells the man, he spits on the ground, he makes mud with his spit, Jesus, all right? Which is gross. But anyway, he covers this man's eyes with the mud, and he says, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. And it says, then the man went and washed, and he came back, and he could see. So then begins this journey, all right? Tell me about this man. What was this man's problem before? He was blind, all right? All right, we're together. All right, what can he do now? He can see. He got some mud put on his face, on his eyes, and goes and washes, and he can see. He comes, that is awesome. Like, he comes back, like, if you could imagine, like, living your whole life blind, you get some crud put on your eyes. Someone tells you to go wash. You go wash. And when you wash and the water comes off your eyes, you are able to do what you could not do your entire life. You think he's excited? Yeah, dude is excited. He doesn't care what anyone says to him. But he shows up, and what he immediately finds is that people are like, are you really the person that was blind? And he keeps having to go, yeah, I am. I mean, you couldn't see before? Yeah, that's me. Wait, you were blind? Yes, I was blind. You can see now? Yes. No, you're not the dude. Are you the dude that was blind? Yes, I'm the dude, all right? And he's like over and over and over and over and over again is he constantly like, okay, come in here. Let me ask you a question. Dude, did you used to be blind? Yes, I'm the guy. Like I was blind. I know you're saying that, but are you saying that you couldn't see before? Yes, since I was born, all right? I'm the same dude. Every single one of you has passed by me. You've seen me every day, and none of you gave me anything. All right, so it's like, but you've seen me all the time. I can see. What I love in this moment with this blind man is that as he repeatedly and constantly says, I am the one who is blind, we get to this point, and these teachers, these rulers, these kind of high up people, the people that are supposed to know everything kind of step in and go, okay. Well, if you're the guy who was blind and now you can see, and you said, who did this? This Jesus guy who put mud on my eyes. Okay, is Jesus a sinner? Like, that's their concern. Not that the dude can see, but whether Jesus is a sinner or not. I was like, did Jesus sin? You know he's a sinner, right? He's a sinner. All right, this whole idea. And so they're totally distracted from this moment right here. And in this moment, I love what the guy says. And this has actually been a lyric in songs that have nothing to do with Jesus, but it's a whole reality. And he goes, I don't know if this man's a sinner or whatever you're talking about. One thing I do know, got to repeat it one more time, is I was blind and I can see. Don't miss the point. So can you imagine like his excitement? He's like, I can see. Really? Can you see? Yes. It's like, you're ugly. All right, I can see. All right, it's the whole idea. it's like it's the whole idea. It's like, I could see. And so, and as it keeps on going, there's this moment, and this moment shakes my heart. Remember, whether we're in the party of like, I believe, or we're in the party of, I ask a lot of questions. And there's a moment in verse 26 through 34 where these high up guys start pushing on him, and they go, no, really tell us about this Jesus guy. Because we're really concerned. Because this is the Sabbath, And you're not supposed to do any work on the Sabbath. These are the rules. And he did work because you could see. He's like, wait, you got it. I can see. He's like, oh, yeah, but can you see really? All right, and so I did. And so he's like, in verse 26 through 34, I love this man's response because this man has a moment where he goes from being a beggar to, with his whole life, trusting in Jesus. My question as we look at this, my question is, if we're here and I'm asking questions, if we're here and I'm struggling with belief, maybe if we're here and I don't believe or know anything about Jesus, how do we change? And how do we go from asking question after question, just being ridden with constant insecurity and doubt, to trusting with our whole heart Jesus is who he says he is? How do we get there? These high up men say, all right, they're asking all these questions, and they keep on asking, and they keep on asking, and then they finally just kind of attack him, and they go, you must be one of his disciples. And he flips it on him. He goes, well, you're the one that's asking in nauseam questions about Jesus. You constantly are asking about Jesus. You just keep saying, Jesus, 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 Jesus. I think you want to be one of his followers. And they're like, what? All right. And they get mad because no, wait, Jesus. All right. And they're so mad. I love it because in this moment, before even Jesus has died and he's come back to life, proving that he's God, this man shares the gospel. There's this supernatural moment right here where this man, I'm going to read his words. This man says this. The high up people go, we're not going to be one of his followers because we don't even know where Jesus came from. And this man just runs with that line. And he goes, whoa, that's interesting. You do not know where Jesus comes from, but he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does whatever God says, we know that God listens to him. This is the blind man speaking. The blind man goes, never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. So if this man were not from God, he couldn't do anything. And he just drops the mic right there and goes, yeah, you're right. I don't know where it came from, but I can see. And never since time began have you seen something like this, and he caused that to happen. If he weren't from God, he could do nothing. And then they just lose it. All right? They're like, no, you're the one that's sinful. Get out. All right? It's I don't care. I can see. All right? And so it's and then I love what Jesus says right here, because how do we get from the place where maybe I'm just covered in doubt, maybe I'm just covered with questions, how do we get to the place that we can wholly, with our whole heart, our whole life, our whole mind, trust him? And it's this reality. Jesus starts to speak. He goes and finds this man because these high up people kicked him out. He goes and finds him. And we see a confirmation that this man truly was following Jesus, because Jesus goes, hey, do you believe in the Son of Man? Remember, before he couldn't see. And he goes, who is the Son of Man? You just tell me where he is. I believe in him. He goes, you're looking at him. And it doesn't just say, he goes, yeah, I believe. It says, he says, immediately he goes, I believe, and he was on it. He was worshiping him. It says he stopped and he worshiped this man that stood in front of him, because he knew there was no one in the history of the planet who had done and who had the power and who was who this man is. So Jesus speaks up, because those same people are there asking the big questions. And Jesus says, you know what? Here's the deal. I came into this world so that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may become blind, which is a really weird statement to make. But he said, they start, the high up people, these Pharisees start to say again, all right, well, are you saying that we're blind now? And Jesus goes, and boom, that's it. Jesus goes, you know what? If you were blind, if you were willing to admit you're blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say you can see, you're still guilty. And so as weird as this is, how do we get from the place of just crazy doubt and questions, and I don't know who this guy, I don't know if I'm willing to just buy into this Jesus. And you'll see this on the screen. Be blind. Like, what? I can't. I can see. Like, it's like I can. No. It's flat out this. Admit our limits. Admit that in our mind, what we can understand. Admit that in our emotions. Admit that in our life, in our very being. Admit that we have incredible, insane limitations. And be willing at least, I think a starting point, at least to say, hey, there is something far greater than me because I am incredibly limited. Stephen Hawking just recently passed away, and I had kind of a weird obsession with Stephen Hawking because Stephen Hawking had an absolutely brilliant mind. As he explored space, as he told it, literally like introduced us in certain elements to what was happening in the cosmos that God, I believe God spoke into being. But towards the end of Stephen Hawking's life, especially the last 10 years, he vehemently, like fiercely, and even sometimes angrily said, I have no need to believe God. I have no need to believe that there is a God. Are you and I willing to at least stop and say, hey, there's something more than me? We can go to the next slide. It's simply this. We have got to forsake our independence. There's a reason that's in quotes because I love to do things on my own. How many of you love it when you figure out how to do something on your own? Like, yeah, we love it. That's a cool thing. That's actually a creative thing that God has put into us. But we love that so much that to a certain degree, we would love to do almost everything on our own. That's where the questions come like, oh, I can figure this out. Oh, I can do this. I love to do things on my own. But if it is all about me, I will always be longing. I will always be lost. I will always be confused. And I will run deeper and deeper and deeper into brokenness with my whole life. If I'm not willing to actually let go of my independence and trust that I'm dependent. If I'm not willing to say, I'm blind. I cannot see where I'm supposed to go. I don't know where my next step is. The one thing about a blind man, and I love that Jesus showed up to him, is that his whole life he has to depend on someone else. To get places, he has to depend on someone to guide him. To receive things, he has to depend on someone bringing that to him. To know where he constantly has to depend on someone else. And Jesus goes, until you're willing to get to that place, you won't experience and know the fullness and how awesome I truly am. You will not see who I really am. So I want to look even more very quickly in Mark chapter 9 at another moment where Jesus shows up, but it starts actually with the disciples. Mark chapter 9 opens up with these disciples. And I don't want to, because the way Mark chapter 9 actually opens up is insane. It's like this huge gift moment where three of the disciples go up with Jesus to this mountain, and they literally get as much proof as you could possibly get that this Jesus is God. In fact, including God the Father's voice saying, "This is my son, listen to him." And they're like, "What? That's amazing." Sentences later, we see them going out trying to do Jesus stuff. All right, they're like, "Hey, we represent Jesus. We're going to go do what Jesus does." Jesus is walking in Mark chapter 9, and he hears literally a fight going down. There's a disturbance. Crud is going crazy. And he comes in, he goes, "Hey, what's going on?" And they go, "Hey, we're having an argument because this man has a son that has demons. And your disciples showed up, and we said, 'Hey, didn't you walk with Jesus? Can't you do something about that?' And they tried, and they can't." Jesus' response to them and the people in Mark chapter 9 is literally, "Faithless generation, how long am I to bear with you?" And he says, "Bring the boy to me." So they bring the boy to Jesus. He's asking the Father, he's like, what is it? Like this, the demons literally cause him to gnash. They cause him to pull at himself. They just occupy everything he is. He throws himself into the fire. His body gets thrown into water. It's literally like this active force that's constantly trying to kill my son. And I love what Jesus says because I don't want us to miss it. Jesus says in Mark chapter 9, the Father says, if you can do anything, if you can have compassion, my son, and there's a theme here, has had this demon from childhood. If you can do anything, please do it. He says, if I can, everything is possible for one who believes. It says immediately the Father goes, I believe. I do. I'm going to pause right here because this is what I'm going to say as we go into this weekend. You're not going to hear me say, hey, I love that you're here. So as we go through the weekend, I just want you to believe more. I want you to conjure up some faith. I want you to believe more and more. Whenever I heard that statement that Jesus makes, like if you had faith as small as a mustard seed, you could move this mountain from here to there. I would always say if I'll concentrate in faith as hard, laser focused concentration on that mountain, I'm going to move it. It's not that reality. It's not this whole, hey, bring that out yourself. Hey, Thomas, all right? Hey, Cameron, bring that out yourself. I love what this man says next. He goes, I do believe, but he's actually wildly honest because his very next statement is, help me when I don't. I believe, but please help my unbelief. I love the honesty of this man because in that moment, watching his son, I could not imagine how heart-wrenching that would be for one of your parents to watch something in you that was causing you constant pain, like constant, perpetual, insane pain your whole life. And Jesus goes, if you believe, I'll solve this. And his honesty was, I do believe, but help me when I don't. Because how do we get to the place that we trust Jesus and we buy into and we follow after Jesus with everything we are, knowing that he truly is God? I think it's simply this, just cry out for help. Cry out to Jesus for help. Don't try to make it up. Don't try to conjure it up. Don't try to see how deep down you can dig. But as you see on the screen, cry out for help. Because this moment is all about Jesus. This life is all about Jesus. You remember the disciples, the people that were out doing the Jesus stuff, they couldn't even do this. And later on, Jesus goes, hey, the only way that these demons and this demon was going to be cast out is by prayer. In Matthew, it literally says the only way this was going to be cast out if you had more faith. So he's saying to them, the only way this was going to be cast out if you called out to me. And those disciples figured out in that moment, we can't do this on our own. I can't go to Watson, and if something's happened with Watson, I can't myself make this happen and go, pow. He's going to go, dude, man, my arm's still broken. You didn't do anything. But Jesus is going, if you'll call out to me for my purpose in my moment. But even for faith and belief, this man understood, hey, I do believe. But it was I think we could ask this question, Jesus, give me faith. Flat out. Maybe one of the most honest questions we could ask him is, Jesus, give me the faith to believe you are who you say you are. Because our lives are all about Jesus. You'll see on the screen in the next slide that we will never truly live on our own. Ever. If you're here and you don't believe, and I've had my friend Joe, as I was growing up, was staunch. He did not believe, no matter how many times we shared with him, no matter how many times we celebrated, he did not believe anything true of Jesus. He was like, yeah, I mean, he existed, he lived. Kind of like the video we just saw. I love the guy who's like, I'm not going to say he didn't exist because history would be like, you're a liar, all right? But it's the whole idea. It's like, but even if you do not trust or believe in Jesus, your whole life is pointing to and is about him. He made you. I'm willing to make that insane of a claim, that he spoke you into being. He knit you together so perfectly, and he did so that you would show who he is. We'll go back to Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking, in all of his brilliance, it breaks my heart that he died. And I know that when he died, he's not going to be with Jesus unless in those final moments he trusted. But Stephen Hawking's brilliance was to point to Jesus. You know the video we just saw? The true and better. Your life is intended for that as well. That the story that Daniel lives, the story that I live, the story that Anna lives, the story that Kate lives, the story that Haley lives, your life is meant with every breath that you take to point to who Jesus is. When we had our little girl, I told you that I'm the one that likes to do things myself. When we had our little girl, we had this plan that, hey, we were going to go to this center, this birth center, and we were going to have the baby and do all this, and it was going to be beautiful and like great and amazing, and we picked it, we're going, done. When we got there, we were there for like 10 hours, and I watched my wife just be in pain for 10 hours. And then they came in and said, no, now we need you to go to the hospital because it's not happening here. So we go to the hospital, and for 14 more hours, I just kept watching it. And I'll be honest, that at the end of 24 solid hours of just watching my wife be in pain and watching my wife, and we still, and this whole time also worrying that our child was healthy, because there were moments just saying, hey, if this one thing here happens again, your daughter's life's gonna be at risk. And I'm sitting here in this room, and remember, we had our plan, right? But in that moment, I was so furious at God. But it was actually in that moment, that crisis of belief. I remember being in the hospital room, and her bed's over here, and I'm kind of a little ways over here. And I was exasperated. And I remember looking, we had a window that sort of looked out onto the street. I remember looking out there and just crying to God, God, I need you to be here. I need you to help me. I need to know that you're here. You can, if you've met our daughter yet, or if you've seen pictures of our daughter, you know our daughter, and you hopefully will meet her soon. You can see that God answered. And what just racks and just beats on my heart is that in that moment where I cried out just angry, I totally forgot these moments where God brought me to this church. God gave me this great privilege to ever be able to hang out with you and laugh with you and celebrate and worship with you, that God gave us this home to live in, that God's been walking the whole time, teaching us these, that God gave me even a better relationship with my father-in-law through all the, like, it was like God just started like lining out the list of like, Andrew, boom, 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 boom. Look at all this. I've been here the whole time. But it took me being willing to say, I'm blind, I don't know what to do. Help. I just want to flat drop this right here. And when I say you're loved, know that God has such a desire for you since before you were ever born, since before time as we know it ever existed, that he came up with a plan to come to you and not wait until you figured him out or figured out where he was. He came to me, and he became like me, and he endured far more brokenness and anger and fury and hatred and pain than I have to this point and ever will. And in fact, all of my mistakes, all of your mistakes, all of my doubts, all of your questions, all of that was thrust on him and on a cross as he lived this perfect life. And all of that crushed him. And it looked like, hey, he's just a man, except for 3 days later, he looks at the thing that we will all experience on this earth, and he looked death in the face, and he said, no, that's not how I roll. And he said, I beat that. And I'll go back to this blind man's story because he has a word for you. That if you would be willing to say, I'm blind, and cry out to him for help. You'll see this up on the screen. And I kind of adapted it to be focused on us. In John 9, verse 3. Remember the moment where they say, hey, did he sin or his parents sin? No, Jesus said, hey, I dealt with sin. Sin crushed me on a cross, and I came back from it, and I was victor over it, and I will always have victory over it. And I did it so that it's not that you sinned, Andrew, or that your parents sinned, Andrew, but I want to give you a place and give you a life so that the works of God, the miracles of God himself are going to be shown in your life. Nevaeh, Emma Kate, Watson, Star, every single person in here, I have made a way so that if you will cling to me and trust that I am not only a man or a prophet or a king, but that I am God himself come to you to rescue you. I was broken because of you, but I came to rescue you and give you life. I want the works of myself, Jesus, to be shown in you. We're about to worship in song and close out. But if you're here tonight and as you heard about this God, this Jesus who's come to us, and you're saying, I've never believed that in my whole life, I want tonight to be an opportunity to you say, hey, I'm willing to say, I need help. I need you. In a second as we sing, I want you, if you have someone next to you, and that's you, and you're going, and you've got a friend next to you, you've got someone you're sitting next to, and for the first time you're going, I believe, I want to believe Jesus. Jesus, give me this gift of faith. I want you to tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, I just did that. For the very first time, I want to know who Jesus is. I want to trust him with everything that I am. Because for everyone here, he wants your life to be a symbol of the works of God. So that when people hear the name Brennan, when people hear the name Andrew, they go, good grief, like, oh my goodness, did that life show me what Jesus looks like? It's the life we were always meant to live.